Let's start with Russia. Now, I need to ask all of you a question. The last 3 years of this war with Russia-Ukraine, we have not seen a full frontal, hard-on, attributable cyber attack from Russia. Who here thinks that Putin and his cyber army are just sitting this one out, right? Sitting on their hands, not doing anything, that highly potent, well-trained, prolific cyber army of Russia's is just taking a pass on this one? Yeah. Parts of the country, every hand goes up. I get very confused in those parts of the country. Bottom line, and I say this to you as a patriot and as a former civil servant, I say this begrudgingly. The Russian cyber strategy these last 3 years has frankly been ingenious. What the Russians are doing is hiding in the noise. That 70% of malicious cyber activity that is criminal in nature and that is financially motivated, the Russians don't want escalation. They don't want attribution. But what they have achieved is a bona fide bloodletting of American industry over these last 3 years. Tremendous cost, both to American industry and to Ukrainian refugees, all without blowing a feather. Now, how are they doing this? Well, I want to give you an example that I've seen in financial services, but I want all of you to think about this through the lens of your business. What might cyber activity, nation-state, Russian-sponsored cyber activity look like in your environment? So let's go back in time to before the start of the war between Russia and Ukraine. If you were to ask 3 years ago, your typical American retail bank, your Bank of America, your Wells Fargo, your PNC, what percentage of the accounts being opened at Bank of America every day were fraudulent? Do you have a guess, sir? What percentage would you guess? 20%? Reasonable guess. We would have loved 20%. Turns out that even 3 years ago, upwards of 40% of the bank accounts being opened every day at big American retail banks were fraudulent, which is a stunning number when you think about it. So what was going on? Why is someone opening all of these fraudulent bank accounts? Well, as it turns out, there are these huge human farms in places like Bangladesh, Ghana, Sierra Leone, huge warehouses filled with people sitting next to stacks of stolen identities, opening an account in your name at Bank of America, another account in your name at Wells Fargo, linking those two bank accounts, and harvesting the 75-cent micro-deposit that banks send each other when you link an account. You've all done this. You link your bank account to some external party, and they send those itty-bitty micro-deposits back and forth to prove that both of those accounts are real. Now, 75 cents doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're doing this hundreds of times a day across hundreds of people, I can tell you there were entire communities in Bangladesh that were being supported by the harvesting of these micro-deposits. How did we know? Well, eventually the US government told us, but we started to catch on when the fraud was very much linked to the monsoon season. Monsoons, fraud's through the roof. Rain ends, everyone goes out to harvest crops, fraud plummets. This was true across the board. Now, you would ask yourself, why weren't the banks doing anything about this? And the reality is that preventing that fraudulent account from being opened would have cost more than 75 cents. So the banks were just viewing this as a retail shrinkage problem, a cost of doing business, 75 cents, hundreds of thousands of times every month across these big retail banks. Now let's fast forward to 3 months prior to the invasion of Ukraine. The Russians see exactly what's going on here, and they decide to capitalize. Suddenly it's January. We're on the phone because, of course, just like you all in this cooperative, we all work together in banking. We, the Big Nine, we talk to each other every morning. What's going on in your world? What's going on in mine? We're on the call, and my friend at Bank of America is like, Rachel, we're at 65% fraud now. Like, we were at 40%, now we're at 65. What's going on? Like, this is starting to really hurt. Fast forward to February, we're a month prior to tanks. The banks are now suddenly at 75% fraud. 75% of the accounts being opened at Wells Fargo every morning are fraudulent. Fast forward now to March. Tanks are staged. We know that this war is about to be launched. My best friend at PNC, this guy has been my best friend for 25 years, calls me on a Saturday morning. I will never forget this. He's like, Rachel, we're going to have an emergency call. We're at 95% fraud. It had cost them $14 million over 2 weeks, and they had made the decision as a leadership team to take their new account opening flow off of the internet altogether. Other banks did exactly the same thing, and for a 3-week period at the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, you could not open a bank account in the United States online. You had to walk into a branch and talk to a real person. Now, what was really going on here? Was this criminal in nature? Nope. Took us a couple months to figure it out, and again, some help from our intelligence community brethren. But when we realized what had happened here, and I can tell a bunch of you have already gotten the joke, this was nothing to do with stealing money. Although it was tremendously expensive for the financial services sector, this was a bona fide denial of service attack. This is the same 3-week period that millions of Ukrainian refugees are trying to move their money, their cash, into the safe harbor of American bank accounts, and the Russians single-handedly, but in a completely non-escalatory and unattributed way, managed to stymie the flight of capital out of Ukraine, deny those refugees the ability to move money, while costing American banks tens of millions of dollars. Think again about what this looks like through the lens of your industry. Everywhere I go across the United States, I'm hearing similar stories from all industries describing this bloodletting that is designed, again, to impair Ukrainian refugees while making this war expensive for us.